Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Yair Attar, and I'm the CTO and co-founder of Autorio. Today, we're going to talk about the manufacturing company that installed Ramscare, our main solution for ongoing risk management, and we're going to see how the journey was to this customer. First, we're going to start with talking about the industry, its challenges, its pain points, its opportunities. Then we're going to talk about specifically the customer pain points, what we were trying to solve, deployment and onboarding journey, how the journey looked like, solving the customer pain points, how did we do that, what was the value, and overall the customer benefits after leveraging our platform. So let's start with some analysis on the industry. We are talking about the pulp and paper manufacturer, or basically when we're talking about the industry, the pulp and paper serves the global economy on many levels. Creates products like paper, cardboard, tissue, packaging materials. Now, this is a heavy chemical-based industry. We're talking about the pulp and paper relies on chemical assets like recovery boiler, chemical storage, environmental control, and safety systems. Those are critical assets that has high impact from a safety perspective, not just on the people on site, but also on societies and environmental. Now, additionally, not everyone knows, but pulp mills are usually leveraged to also serve as a utility. So basically, from the steam, they are generating electricity, usually to the site itself, but also to surrounding regions and societies. Now, from industry's challenges perspective, we are talking about challenges that include environmental regulations, raw material costs, supply disruptions, labor, and global competition. Now, on another hand, digital transformation is actually being leveraged as an opportunity. Digitization and Industry 4.0, as we know it, basically helps to address some of those challenges effectively. But we also know that connecting the environment, making it more digitalized, it also opened the environment to more risks and exposures. Now, when we're talking about the customer, first of all, we are talking about a very complex environment. Different DCS vendors, different equipment from different generations, ABB, Valmet, Siemens, Andritz. So multiple companies that act as suppliers and a lot of the times also bring their own controls to the environment. So besides the equipment itself, we are talking about siloed controls, firewalls, EDR, antiviruses, applications from an operational perspective that no one configured properly from security checks. This creates lack of standardization and coherence in all security and operational controls. It's hard to manage so much controls and understand how they all connect. Now, in Europe, up until recently, there was NIST-1, where basically NIST-1 was focused on critical infrastructure, utilities, energy. Now, at the beginning of the year, the EU has basically published NIST-2, which now addressed the maturity of the operational industries, like chemicals, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, on many levels. And basically, this customer also needs to comply to NIST-2. What's going to happen in October 2024 is that organizations that will not be compliant will start getting fines. Now, when we started working with this customer, it was clear that there are no defined processes and roles. Who's doing what and when? What type of findings does the engineers are responsible for, the asset owners, the networking team, the security folks? So it was a bit of a mess. Now, there's a lot of solutions in place, and a lot of them just create a lot of noise. events on multiple levels of even legitimate behavior, or a lot of inaccurate data. So especially we already know today that passive, which still remains the majority of the discovery capabilities within the market, is not that sufficient. It's hard to collect very detailed information on the assets passive only. And it requires also a lot of sensors. So the total cost of ownership is quite big. Also, there are a lot of IT security types of user interface. Now, this is quite challenging for operational members that are not cybersecurity savvy. That needs to be very simple, very intuitive. So with that aspect, leveraging different security controls and technologies, it's hard and challenging for some of the people on site. Additionally, we are talking about a multinational organization with more than 100 sites globally. So the CISO and his team are lacking the governance, understanding how each site acts, whether they can benchmark the sites one to another, and see what's the risk goes up, goes down, or whether they have policies they would want to understand whether the sites are working accordingly. Now, interesting is that although the customer has different controls in place, he still experienced impact to its operations with a cyber attack. I think this helped the customer realize that visibility, monitoring, detection capabilities are important, but still at the end of the day, with the majority of the attacks, and we're talking about ransomwares happening more occasionally, it's not helping to reduce the possibility of being impacted by a ransomware. And this is why they were looking for something that will help them shift from a reactive type of approach to a more of a proactive type of approach. So before we jump into the deployment of the customer, let's just remind everyone how ROMSquare works. So ROMSquare, an OT risk management platform, is basically comprised out of two main components. The first one is the edge devices. The ROMSquare edge devices are responsible for the data collection. They can collect data in various ways, from passive to safe active to integration based, with firewalls via API, with IDS solutions. It can also connect to network switches and listen to the traffic. It can safe active query devices. It can integrate with industrial management solutions like DCSs or OPCs or engineering solutions, and even digest project files. The reasons for the variety of ways of collecting data is because we understand this market is very fragmented. Every environment looks different. Even within the same customer, there's a lot of sites that looks different based on region, based on past M&As. And we need to have a flexible way to collect information in a scalable manner without deploying a lot of edge devices, and to provide a single pane of glass. Now, once edge devices are deployed close to the environment, they are starting to collect the data ongoingly and then send the information securely to the central manager. The central manager itself is the main console where users also log in. And this is where the analysis and algorithms are running to provide the insights and the value from dashboards, KPIs, reports, insights, where to focus. And this is how ROMSquare works. Now, when we're talking about typical deployment of a multinational organization, usually what we're going to see is a central management deployed within the data center, within the cloud, where basically all sites are connected and they see only their own information. And basically within the sites themselves, we have the edge devices responsible for the data collection. Again, each edge device can collect data from integrating with different management applications or controls. by querying and talking to the assets themselves, even getting to level 0 assets by querying devices that manage, let's say, a ring behind them, like a Profinet ring or a Modbus ring. And at the end of the day, all data is being collected, gathered, and being sent to the central manager. Because ROMSquare is an open platform, we also distribute the information to different technologies and ecosystem products that exist within the customer environment, whether those are to CMDB like ServiceNow, or ticketing and workflow systems, or SIEM solutions, to really populate the information to the relevant stakeholders. Let's talk about the customer. And in this case, this was one of the largest sites. And the customer actually preferred to have a local deployment. Now, at the end of the day, we are now talking about with the customer a governance view that basically going to connect the dots from multiple regions, countries, and sites. But in this case, the focus was really on the site level. And what we're seeing here is a central manager deployed within the DM set and 3 edge devices in each and every DCS environment. And we can see here the systems that the platform was connected to. So connecting to DCS applications like the ABB 800XA or Siemens PCS7. Now we are leveraging OPC events and OPC AE, basically with the forwarder from the DCS environment to the central management as syslogs. Integrating with CrowdStrike and McAfee EPO. So some environments are managed by CrowdStrike and some environments are managed by McAfee EPO. Integrating with different firewalls in place, CISO, Coasa, and Palo Alto. The customer also has a local AD. So we're also integrating with controls like AD to analyze and assess the identity access management within the environment. The customer has an IDS in place. They are now in the process of replacing and basically shifting towards firewalls that will serve also as an IDS. And this is something we're seeing as a trend. And also leveraging SNMP traps. So in some very small areas that the customer would still want to identify if someone connects something to a switch, we can also leverage SNMP traps as syslogs. So at the end of the day, you are seeing a combination of different integrations, also leveraging our passive and active analysis to, with only 3 edge devices, collect information widely from the different DCS environments. The reason, by the way, for the 3 edges is because each and every DCS environment is quite segmented. So we don't want to create basically opening up ports between different DCS environments. Of course, at the end of the day, what we are doing with the customer that we are starting the journey with, we're sitting for an architectural review to understand how exactly it's the best scalable, but also secured way of collecting the data. So let's talk about the journey. Usually we're starting with the kickoff, right? To understand the use cases, to align on them, to review the architecture of the environment, the processes, the people, to identify the best integrations in place. Again, there's no need for integrating with everything. It's only what serves from a value perspective. And to basically set the project timeline and resources from both sides. Usually during the onboarding phase, we carry out the majority of the tasks in order to basically implement and execute faster and get to the phase of training and enablement where the customers start taking the lead. Now, on the very first few weeks, we are working on the installation, the network configurations, the platform configurations and integrations that needed to be installed on the platform, and we're starting to collect the data. So basically value starts coming from day one. But the goal is to contextualize it and make it more customized to the customer environment. So on the last week, we are working with the customer to calibrate the data and work on some validations to start adding impact levels and configurations of those impacts and validate those based on the customer feedback, to validate also the operational hierarchy. As a risk-based platform, we understand the context of the environment, and at the end of the day, the context matters. We talked about that there are assets that their impact is much higher. So if I identify any vulnerabilities, any gaps, any threats in those assets, risks should be prioritized higher than other assets that has less of an impact. We also calibrate insights. Insights are pattern-based analysis. So identify patterns from multiple sources, right? We're talking about firewall logs, we're talking about events from agents, we're talking about different types of things that we see, and connecting those dots to identify patterns that mean something more from a threat or vulnerability perspective. Highlighting where to focus from an operational security perspective. The platform is also supporting out-of-the-box mitigation playbooks. Now, in order to make them more fit to the customer use case, what we're doing is customizing them, helping the customer leverage his own existing controls, where it can go and close a firewall port instead of remediation of a vulnerability. So helping with more easier types of mitigations or workarounds or leveraging compensation controls instead of touching each and every asset. Once we have that in place, we're training the customer, we're helping even with a race to table definition, because this will enable workflows within the platform. Identify which type of users should get which type of findings and open up cases so they can start addressing the risk and have their own time, and without this sense of urgency, to start reducing the risk proactively. Once we have that in place, and we're talking about general 4 weeks journey, and this is a complex site with multiple types of integrations, then we're moving on to the ongoing phase where we are occasionally working with the customer on a maturity assessment to see where he is on this journey, whether he is leveraging the platform to the maximum. We have monthly touch bases and, of course, content upskilling, every new type of capability, every new type of functionality, whether some more trainings are required, and assisting with upgrades and updates if needed within the customer download portal. So at the end of the day, we are talking about a very large and complex site, but within 4 weeks, we are finalizing the process. And of course, when we are talking about the multinational organization, then we're doing this in scale, and the trainings and a lot of the items are happening in parallel, especially when we have the use case where the central management is deployed in one place and edge devices are deployed within different sites globally. So briefly, let's understand again the journey from a value perspective. The first phase is gaining visibility, understanding which assets are in place, to which process they belong, and where they are located. What vulnerabilities, gaps, and exposures exist on these assets? What are the security controls? Integrating with those security controls to gain deeper level of visibility, understanding the security posture of the environment, but then running attack graph algorithms within our sandbox to identify how the environment is really exposed. So it could be that I have vulnerabilities on the asset itself, but it can actually not be exploited from the hull or the plant because I have controls that help to reduce the level of exploitability. The end of the day, the platform suggests practical mitigation steps, where you should focus, how can you leverage your compensation controls instead of going and touching the asset itself, because we know how challenging it is. This is basically a risk-based management approach, helping you have the best call to action with the less resourceful resources as possible. So just to give you a bit of a flavor, how does it look like? When we are talking about onboarding different types of integrations, we are talking about integrating with different controls or industrial or management solutions, from the ABB and Siemens applications to different types of controls within the environment, whether those are firewalls, whether those are network devices, whether this is an Active Directory. And of course, we have our own proprietary ways of collecting data, whether it's passive, active, or project files, or different types of files that we are able to digest. At the end of the day, the goal is to provide a single pane of glass, connecting those dots from those different data sources to understand how it all plays together from a security and help to focus on risk that matters. We are talking about governance and compliance, enabling the customer to understand where he is benchmarked against different global standards. In this case, we are seeing the IEC 62443 3-3. Now, there is this site level assessment where it also relies on a wizard that's questionnaire based, because there are some things that cannot be automated from an analysis perspective because they related to processes and people. So we help with that as well. But we are also talking about even asset level compliance that we are collecting and analyzing automatically by analyzing dozens of security checks from password policies or credentials or things like that. And at the end of the day, check them against the benchmark from in this case, IEC 62443 or NERC-CIP for different security levels 1, 2, and 3. The platform, as we mentioned, helped to focus on the exploitable vulnerabilities. So what we're seeing here is basically on the left side, entry points, on the right side, the target points, the critical assets, and what type of vectors exist, where at the end of the day, the customer gets also simplified findings where he should focus based on this graph analysis. This is, of course, a more detailed view that an expert can dig deeper and understand why is that, and the level of connectivity, not just who communicating with whom, but also who can communicate with whom based on the firewall configurations analysis, ACLs, and different types of artifacts. At the end of the day, the platform is providing very tangible information on gaps and exposures. In this case, for example, unauthorized OT internet communication. So by analyzing the firewall policy, we identify any gaps immediately that expose the environment to the outside or between different zones and conduits. And at the end of the day, the goal of the platform is to help manage those types of findings. Not just to keep you with understanding, okay, I know what I have now, but let's start creating workflows and processes, assigning to different people, having case management that also integrates with different ticketing and workflow systems like ServiceNow. We're enabling the customer to start having routines and processes in place that enables to also see how people and processes are progressing and not just technology. So to summarize, when we're talking about the customer, before, there were just too many products, not managed properly, and a lot of configuration gaps. After, what we're talking about and what we're seeing now is a single pane of glass, right? Connecting those dots together, an overall improvement of the existing controls effectiveness by 60%. We're talking about even things like the segmentation gaps that we just saw, or EDR or antivirus coverage, or configurations where all agents are updated to the latest status. So really helping to gain more out of the controls you have. Before, there were too many events, too many findings, too many vulnerabilities out of context, a lot of missing information on asset data because there was focus on basically discovering passive only. So it was really hard to understand where to focus, what to do first. Once we finalized the data calibration, we're talking about a noise reduction of up to 70%. So from thousands or dozens of thousands of events to a few insights where the customer should really focus on the things that matter. And also not just going and trying and close all vulnerabilities that exist out there. Could they really be exploited? So helping to focus on the exploitation vectors, and only then, even then, trying to find compensation controls that can help reduce the exploitability. If before the focus was more on detection, and again, as I mentioned at the beginning, the customer, even although having solutions in place, still got hit by an attack, shifting the focus to a more protective, proactive approach and exposure management, and shorten the exposure time from months to days, helping to contain better between zones and environments that if something happens, it will not spread, or even reducing the possibility of something to go in because analyzing the controls and the segmentation and how it all plays together. Before, there was lack of governance and compliance, understanding how the customer would like to benchmark against different types of regulations and standards, and we are talking about NIS2. So leveraging our platform, they started using the IEC 62443 as a base standard, who basically is also complied with NIS2 requirements. And one of the last thing is that operational teams really lacked the cybersecurity know-how, how to manage different types of controls and solutions they had in place. With our platform, it integrated and operated within the maintenance routines and by maintenance teams. So at the end of the day, the customer chose to basically I would say, IT networking guy on site is the one taking the lead, but he's opening up cases for the asset managers and for the maintenance teams to actually go and implement the mitigation playbook. So they open up cases and assign them to maintenance teams where they are starting to introduce security configuration changes within their weekly maintenance routines. So I hope that I was able to convey how a customer can leverage our platform, how to shift from a more of a reactive to a more of a proactive approach, helping to become ransomware ready, helping to have a better security posture, and helping to leverage the controls that already exist in the environment before going and investing in something else. If you have any more questions or anything else, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much.